that some guy in 1922 wrote Lithuania. Some bureaucrat could literally say, we don't know what is this Lithuania. Sorry, you go to Lithuania, get citizenship. So, I mean, that's what happens sometimes.
Somebody is American, for example, and has a location-dependent income, what are some of the places that you think they should look at that are not super difficult to get into to kind of like start the citizenship process from, and that would bring a number of benefits? So, for example, one of the benefits for me is I love Europe. I want to spend a lot of time in Europe. So for me, it's a good idea to have a European citizenship, right?
Sure.
So what are some of those locations that you think Americans can kind of look at first?
Well, understand my perspective generally comes from the people that we work with, which is you make $500,000 a year or more, or you have a net worth of $1 million or more. And so I'm generally skipping over the move to France and hang out for 5 years and eat a few baguettes and learn French and you'll become French. I mean, that is a path. Let's talk about the paths to become a citizen. The first path that you mentioned already was citizenship by descent. You have a parent, a grandparent, sometimes a great-grandparent that had citizenship or was entitled to citizenship. People often don't think about this, And I had one gentleman recently. He moved from your part of the world over to Canada for a while back in the 70s, then went back to the U.S. He has a situation where his kids are entitled to that Canadian citizenship because they were born in the right time, right? So look at your family tree. Where are you qualified? The next way you can become a citizen is through what's called naturalization. Now, there's two ways to do this. We often focus on what I call paper residence, which is where you're kind of using an arbitrage of putting in the time in the country as a resident on paper, i.e. you do whatever the qualifying thing is to become a temporary resident or a permanent resident of the country. You get your residence pass, but they are not explicit in necessarily how long you need to stay there in order to qualify for citizenship after X number of years. Whereas a country like the United States, you get a green card, you can work towards citizenship, you better be there 10, 11 months a year. UK, Ireland, Australia, all the same. You go to some of these more far-flung countries, we don't always talk about them because whenever they become popular, everyone starts going there. There was a big scandal in Paraguay with this a number of years ago because everybody, I literally think I've gotten 10,000 emails from South Asians saying, fast, easy, cheap, Paraguay. It was ruined. But if you can go find a place where the law is you must have a residence permit for 5 years. I'll just give you one example. I'm married to an Armenian, so this is a kind of an interesting one. You can't really easily duplicate, right? But after 2 years of being a resident, I can go and I can apply for citizenship if I want it, right? So I don't have to live there, but I have to have the residence permit. Now, if you want to live there, you do open up more countries. So a country like Mexico, for example, not a bad place to live for an American. It's right next door, close to the U.S. You can put in less time up front and then more time in the couple of years leading up to the naturalization and become naturalized. Okay, so that's one path. And then the next path would be by investment. And so this is, I'm going to make a donation. I did this to St. Lucia. There's about 5 Caribbean islands. There's a number of others in Europe, South Pacific that do this. It's about 12 programs in total. You make a donation, you buy some overpriced real estate, something like that. You get a passport generally in a matter of months. And so that's one way to do it.
You don't even have to go over a residency if you do something like that. If you buy a large property or something, you just get a passport up front.
Yeah, so in my case, I did the St. Lucia program, and it's a number of years ago, and you just send them the money. Now, I would like to go to St. Lucia, but I've been traveling all around. It's a little tough to get to if you're not flying through London or through the U.S., and so I keep just putting it off. But no, I've never been there. You don't have to go there. You literally all do it through the mail. You get a FedEx envelope one day, and there's your passport. The way that's a bit more focused for like a better quality passport is I had someone, for example, he sold a huge hotel business in the U.S. and he wanted to go invest. He had 9-figure, sale proceeds. And we found a country in the European Union where they were looking for people to build hotels in this kind of up-and-coming resort area. And they said, hey, if you build a hotel and it meets this criteria and you hire, 50 workers and blah, 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 the Minister of the Economy will sign off on let's give this guy citizenship under the exceptional provision. That'll go on to the Prime Minister. He'll just rubber stamp whatever the Minister of the Economy says because he trusts him. And that's kind of a unique way for some people to get citizenship. So there's lots of different ways to do it is the point.
I think for most people listening, the easiest place would be if they do have descent from somewhere, right? So if their grandparents are from somewhere. What are some of the countries that, because I know Ireland was big on that, and then they kind of
Yeah.
pulled back on it, right? They kind of were like, that's too much or something like that. So what are some of the countries right now that you think are good places that have good programs that are easy to kind of acquire citizenship through?
Well, citizenship by descent, it is probably the best way to do it because it's pretty cheap, right? And you don't have to put in the time. So you're getting a low price and you're getting low time commitment, right? UK and Ireland are still pretty good. If we're talking about, parents, generally in the case of the UK, there's a weird loophole for a grandparent. Ireland, you can still do grandparents. If your grandparents themselves were very thoughtful and they put you in the birth register, you can go back 3 generations. I've never seen anyone, I don't think, do that. But those are pretty straightforward. The rest of them, I'll tell you what, I just got a document the other day from Lithuania, or from my grandfather whose parents were Lithuanian. And I've been working on this for 4 years. Finally, this document appears. My mother sends me this document she's going through, or one of her relatives sent it to her. So it literally, in many cases, outside of those, Anglo countries, or in Ireland, I guess you don't want to call it an Anglo country, but it comes down to you're going to be looking at archives. You're going to be looking in churches that may have been burned down for a baptism certificate. I mean, you're really looking for a lot of stuff. And I see so many people that either one of two things. They miss it by like a year. Just had a guy the other day. When was your father naturalized from? I forget where he was from. Like a year before the guy was born. And then at that time, they didn't have dual citizenship back in the 50s or whatever. So, I mean, it's just you lost the old one. Now you have American and, you're out. And then the other situation is you're tracking down documents, which is the case of, in my personal case. So it's just very difficult. It's not particularly fast in many cases. So I won't say any of them are easy. The process is easy once you gather all those documents, but they can also be very bureaucratic and say, you know what? Like, so, the first thing my team said when I got this birth certificate, where's Lithuania? They may not accept that, she said. They're like, that may be the end of you. That some guy in, 1922 wrote Lithuania. Some bureaucrat could literally say, we don't know what is this Lithuania. Sorry, you go to Lithuania, get citizenship. So, I mean, that's what happens sometimes. So it has to be kind of a fun adventure. And I have a couple people right now, because I have people coming right now with this whole coronavirus thing, and they're worried about their freedom, and they're worried about the changing everything in their country. And they're saying, I have one guy, he qualifies for 3 of these potentially. But he knows it's going to take years, and he says, I don't want to wait years to be protected, so I'm going to go and spend the money now, and whatever we accumulate along the road, 3 years from now, it'll just be like picking up pennies.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things with, and I've heard you say this before as well, is like, you don't want to wait until you need it, right? It's something that you want to prepare beforehand so that when you do need it, like right now, right? You can't, if you're now experiencing from coronavirus that you can't leave and you can't go anywhere, now's not the time to start.
It's like an insurance policy. I mean, you don't wait until you crash the car to get an insurance policy. Now, just to answer your earlier question, most people in the United States, they're going to qualify, they're going to have a European country. So, I mean, most European countries have some program. Again, like the UK generally only goes back 1 generation. Some of them, like Hungary or Italy, go back 3 generations, or in my case, Lithuania, 3 generations. Some of them will say, after 1922 or something. Mexico works. We were helping a guy with Mexico. I mean, I guess you could do Vietnam or something. I don't know how necessarily useful it is, although maybe in the coming years. So some of the South American countries, or I guess a lot of the South American countries offer it. European countries, I think Asia's much more tough. Obviously in the Gulf region, the Middle East, it's generally, about like only from your father and a lot of stuff there. So, I mean, parents, pretty much I would say most countries. Grandparents, you've got a decent number of European countries that'll do it. And by the way, if you happen to be Jewish, then Israel's an option, and that's not necessarily tied to being Israeli in your past, but it's just tied to being Jewish.
Right. So, I mean, I think what we're gathering here is that, like, the very first place to start, if this is a topic that's interesting to you, if this is something that you want to do, the very first place to look at is like, look at your, background. Do you have parents that maybe you can get citizenship from? Like, what is their background, and explore the citizenship through descent programs that they offer. So what happens if that's not really an option. Maybe it's too far back. Maybe the countries that you could get are not ones that you're interested in. What are some of the first places that, you would look at if you have to like buy, and go through some of these investments? And what are the numbers? Like how much money do you need to really realistically consider buying, quote unquote, a citizenship?
Well, I remember somebody told me somebody got upset with me a number of years ago when I went through the St. Lucia process, and they said it's not fair that a guy can just send $100,000 and get citizenship. And I said, well, hold on a second. Your family, your mother was, an immigrant, didn't make a lot of money. You get to live there. You get to use all the services in the United States. Probably paid very little in tax, and you got citizenship 5-6 years later. That's obviously a lot cheaper. Now, if you make $1 million a year and you move to the United States while you're getting citizenship and you're paying $500,000 in taxes, suddenly St. Lucia for $100,000 seems a lot cheaper than $2.5 million, right? So what I would say is there are relatively easy options in two places, Europe and South America. Asia's not going to work, the Middle East is not going to work. Africa, by and large, is rather difficult in the extent that you'd even want some of those. And so, there are freelancer visas in Europe. France has one. You don't have to make a lot of money. I think in many cases they're like 18 or 20,000 euros. You can go and you can live there. And so now you're in, right? And so now if you commit to spending the time there, it might be 6 months in some countries, 9 months in some countries. I think a lot of the countries in mainland Europe are more like 6 months, whereas Ireland and UK are more demanding. But if you put in the time, and with that, they're going to say, okay, well, now you're our taxpayer, so you've got to pay tax on your worldwide income and any companies you have, right? If you've got a job, if you're a freelancer, if you've got a company in Hong Kong, whatever, it's all on the table. It's all going home to President Macron. But that may be a good deal for you because you can kind of pay it over time, right? It used to be you could just go to Belgium and you could just get on a payroll somewhere and you just, pay 15, 20,000 euros a year in taxes, and you don't have to be there all the time, and they would eventually make you a citizen. They've made it a little bit tougher now. What's interesting for people who are maybe more remote and who don't want as much of the tax burden is you can go to South America, and there's a lot of good residence programs down there. A lot of them are relatively open. And they're more income-based as well. So unlike Asia, where they want to see, hey, do you have $500,000 in the bank? There it might be, do you have $1,500 a month going into your bank account? You may not even need to bring it into the country. And so those countries may be a bit more flexible. Obviously, European passports are very desirable, but I also think a lot of the South American passports are very desirable. So those are the two parts of the world I would look at, and I would ask myself, what is my income and how am I willing to pay? Because you always pay. Most people pay for citizenship with their time. They put boots on the ground. But if you're willing to make an investment in a country, that can speed things up or reduce the requirements. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.